Let me see if there's anything else I want to do in our update segment before we hop into the main content for today, which is, of course, the Vosh Manifesto. No. So I'll just jump into that. So there's a lot of different avenues we could go to, a lot of different options for how we choose to cover this, which I'll kind of give to you as we move along. No matter what, we'll have a little bit of a TLDR breakdown of what I thought about everything. That way, no matter how many hours of coverage we do, my thoughts about the broader thing. So I'll just go down the list of that real quick. So I liked his approach to citing opinions or statements religiously. It's something I've encouraged the BIA and those that work with me to do in a variety of different contexts. I'm coming from essay writing. So in essay writing, we do a lot of citations, and usually if you're making a statement and it's specific enough, and especially if it came from somewhere else, you need to be citing that, and you will be in trouble, especially at a graduate level, if you're making a claim and you're not citing it. So that's a force of habit that I have that I realize most people won't have. Stephen at multiple points mentions how people might find that autistic or over the top to cite that many things all at once. But personally, as an essay writer, I enjoyed it. I understand it's overwhelming for a lot of online communities, but it's something that I like, something that I enjoy, something that I think that more people should make a habit out of doing. Not only does it give people access to the things that you're talking about and prove what you're trying to say, but beyond that, it also holds you accountable to not make broad, sweeping claims or arguments that can't be supported by something that you're actually talking about. So if you were to characterize the conversation with Vosh, for example, by saying it went this way and he said these things, and you're not in the habit of citing what it is that you're saying, you might end up saying something that was beyond what the conversation could actually prove, because you're in this habit of not citing anything that you're talking about. So in general, I think it's a good procedure to go through. One big takeaway from this is that Vosh brigades and specifically encourages harassment campaigns against people on stream, whether that's for the policewoman, Cat Black, Reddit threads, or other examples that Stephen talks about throughout the document. We have clear examples of that, enough to make a full-throated declaration that that is the truth. So that's one thing I think the document does a really good job at proving and exemplifying through its references to other materials from Vosh's stream. The trans email part was amazing. I think that giving the platform to other trans people to make the arguments that maybe Stephen would make himself is a far more powerful way of doing it than him coming out and talking about it himself. And I've actually been frustrated, and I will name one specific name because it's a good example of it, from Vivian, who, when I started streaming, there used to be this Mindwaves Discord chat where us and a bunch of other creators would talk. And I had a lot of really good, meaningful discussions with Vivian where we both moved on different points, and I was able to get through to her on stuff and her to me. And I felt like I grew a lot by having those conversations. Seeing Vivian, who said, I didn't watch it, I'm not going to watch it. I heard that I was mentioned. Can somebody link to me the point where I mentioned? Somebody linked her or sent her an image of the emails where it's being discussed. And the way that she interprets that is Stephen is making these points about her and can't get her name out of his mouth and yada, yada. And it's just super sad to see, because she's not understanding what it is that she's even looking at, seemingly based on her replies. And I think that this is something that will likely happen with other creators as well, who don't give him the time of day enough to even look at the VOD, or frankly, even look at the images that they're being linked. These are the words of other trans people who feel like they're alienated, often ousted by these online groups of trans people for simply having a disagreement about what the trans label should mean, what it feels like to be a trans person, what the solutions are to some of the many problems that people undergo. There was just a lot mentioned in the emails, and I think using the emails as the vehicle to tell that story and make those points was a really intelligent decision from Stephen. And I really appreciated hearing those testimonials from a bunch of different people about what they think the problems are and what they think maybe even the solutions would be to those problems. I really like that section. I think reflected in those emails are the same fears I have of speaking out on the current direction of discourse, given my own experience and personal relationships with trans people and the topic at large. I think that a lot of people are worried that if they say something that's not with the mainstream narrative of these trans communities, that it could be something that gets them in a lot of trouble, that gets them ousted, that gets them, may even threaten their livelihood, their jobs. And for these people in particular in the emails, they are a part of the trans community. They are trans people who, a lot of them have been living as trans people for maybe over a decade at this point, and they're still worried about these things. And as a result of that worry, of that fear of being involved in those communities, you don't have older, functioning, passing, well-adjusted trans people in those communities to guide early transition trans people and to give them advice. One thing I'm going to link a lot of the trans things that we're talking about to is my experience with the other part of the LGBT community, which is going to be lesbians, gays, and bisexual people. So for instance, lesbians and gays can disagree with bisexuals on a number of different things regarding the differences in their experiences. A bisexual person, for all intents and purposes, could choose to live as a straight person. They could have cis relationships where they're a man dating a woman or a woman dating a man. They can seemingly avoid a lot of the kind of sticking points that would make life difficult for lesbians or gay people, right? And because of that, lesbians and gay people like to distinguish their experience from the experience of bi people. And this can often lead to animosity within the group. But I also think that, at least speaking as somebody who's talked to a lot of bi people, there is an understanding that there is a difference in those experiences. Perhaps the same way that there is a difference between trans people that are going from one gender to another gender in the binary and trans people who are perhaps non-binary or who might use neopronouns or things like this, right? There's going to be differences fundamental to those experiences. And if you're not allowed to point that out, if you're not allowed to explain that to people that are new to the community, you're kind of losing out on this mentorship, on this kind of sharing of experiences that could really help young people. In the lesbian, gay, and bisexual community, there are a lot of people who are older, who have been through a lot worse discrimination, who have lived years of life with this and have had a lot of different kinds of relationships and experiences. And there's a lot of sharing of information between them and newer generations of gay people, bi people, lesbian people. And I think that that is something that's greatly benefited that part of the community. And if trans people are robbed of that because of the actions of online trans creators or online trans communities, or nowadays in colleges, even real life communities of trans people, I think that's a great loss, not only to those communities, but to the young people who are a part of them, because they're not going to have that same mentorship experience that you would have in the other communities. And I think that's something that the trans community needs to look long and hard at, and they need to kind of rethink the way that they're carrying themselves. And I don't think that's an unfair thing to say, especially after reading these emails. And if you scoff at that, if you completely disagree with it, if you disregard it, I think you're missing out on something that could possibly, in the words of the people in these emails, set you back years or even decades in terms of acceptance, in terms of mentorship, and in terms of positive aspects for young trans people. So, that was something that I heard that I felt like I could connect to in a unique way and maybe draw a parallel there. You don't have to agree with everybody in the community. There are lesbian people that completely disagree with the bi community, or gay people that disagree with the bi community. There are differences in experiences, which are noted frequently and are often given, and furthermore, there are disagreements even within those subsects of the community. So for instance, there are disagreements between gay people who, for all intents and purposes, outwardly act like, cis people. They dress regularly. They don't have a lisp when they talk. They don't have any kind of inflection that would give them away as being gay or something like that. And those people might have problems with what we would call more like queenie gays, or people that speak with a lisp and are very extravagant and are very they're much more like outwardly clockable as being gay, or much more. There's a particular word and I can't think of what it is. those people have problems with the other group of people, and they feel like that group of people is causing problems for the larger gay community, because then every gay person gets characterized as being that, or the expectation is that, and when you don't meet that, you are the weirdo. And so, that there's animosity between those segments of the community. So this isn't just something that we see in the trans community, it's something that we see in the other communities that I personally have more experience with. And so that's something that I think is also worth keeping in mind as a parallel here, and something that I think, while the gay community is still working on, I think it's being pushed in a direction that I think is positive in the real world. And I try to be a part of that, of making sure, for instance, that we're not using the F slur to refer to Queenie people that we dislike. That's not reclaiming a slur to kind of benefit everybody or to take back a word. If you're using it to discriminate against a part of the gay community that you personally dislike, this isn't using that term in a friendly way, the way that Black people might use the N-word. You're using it to discriminate into a certain part of the community. I'm very much so not down for that. And that's part of the reason why I'm not down with the idea of reclaiming the slurs more broadly. So that's kind of another parallel there. Beyond the concerns the trans audience members list about alienation and isolation, I also worry that I could wind up stepping on the toes of and hurting audience members and viewers who are in this group, as someone who is very much not trans, right? So anytime I talk about trans issues, I worry that something that I say could be upsetting to people, and I didn't even see that coming because I'm not a part of that community, and I don't know what that experience is like. So that's another reason, kind of compounding on the worry of talking about issues like this. I hope to use this stream as a vehicle to deliver my own feelings and thoughts on what these folks bring up. If you have some kind of reply or wish to talk me down from a particular viewpoint, I'm down to talk with you in the future when we have a Discord community event, which we do, I think it's basically monthly or every couple or 3 weeks at this point. So I'll often do a stream where we have it open to the community. Anybody can come on and talk with me. And I think that'll be kind of the forum for that. We could have a short back and forth in the chat, but like nothing is comparable to having a one-on-one conversation over voice about these particular topics. So if you see anything, just take note of it, and then we could bring it up in a different forum that would probably be better for kind of getting down to the bottom of something. Furthermore, you can always do ! Email in the Twitch chat, even when I'm not streaming, to get my email. It's booksmarts.twitch@gmail.com. Let me know what it is that you disagreed with. If you want to talk about things, that's cool, or we could hash it out over email. I'm always open to those. I always try to respond to emails, even if it takes me a little bit. So that's another forum to voice those kinds of concerns, which I'm sure could come up over the course of this stream. Ontologically evil, kind of moving on past the trans emails, is something I've recently run into in conversations both with me and surrounding me for my work in essay writing. For those that don't know, prior to my work on Twitch, I made a living helping graduate students write their theses, as well as tutoring people in essay writing and other school subjects. I had recently spoken to Rose Rist at length about this, and near the end, perhaps in jest, though I'm not entirely sure, there was a mention about me just being straight up ontologically evil.
I talk too much about why we shouldn't call our opposition ontologically evil, but not enough about what we should do when the opposition calls themselves ontologically evil.
I'm not super certain on the terms here, and even Destiny seems to cast doubt on how one could claim to have the correct interpretation on that phrase. But I think that labeling someone some sort of evil for a thing they've done wrong, a position they're incorrect about, or a immoral action that they've taken, simply going off of the fact that I did, or to ignore the human reality of every single individual case where this happens, is a problem. It's not something you should be doing. In my case, simply going off of the fact that I did papers ignores how that process works, what's involved with that, what other sorts of things was I doing, and any weighing out of the other positions or actions I was taking in life more broadly, right? I think that this issue of weighing out all that people do and making a habit of focusing on a single moment to define them as evil is exemplified in Stephen's use of examples of each of these people doing something similar to the person they're condemning. So at multiple points in this document, Stephen will point out, hey, you said this thing was evil. You said that I was evil because I did this thing. And yet here are 2 or 3 clips of you doing the exact same thing in a different kind of circumstance. And I would presume that you don't view yourself as particularly hypocritical, but this would be an example of you doing a similar thing. Should you be labeled as completely evil? Should you be wholly disregarded? I don't know. What this is, I think, is an intellectual shortcut. People use this ontologically evil thing to strive further thoughts about people or their own conduct and justify going ham on someone or disregarding them, wholeheartedly. Frankly, plenty of non-terminally online people find no issue going ham on or disregarding people without the philosophy jargon. If you're avoiding confronting the part of your brain that knows what you're doing is wrong, I'm just disappointed in you. If you're simply using something you don't fully understand as a means of punctuating mean shit you're about to do or why you write people off, I'd simply advise to do something else because it's communicating more than you intend by calling them ontologically evil. And I think that we need to work on this. We need to avoid intellectual shortcuts like writing off a long bit of text about what somebody believes by calling it a schizo post, or by calling someone autistic for paying attention to details the way that Stephen does in this document, or calling somebody ontologically evil because you disagree with their philosophical beliefs about a particular topic, or perhaps a discrepancy between what they think is wrong and what they're choosing to engage in. I think that there are more deep ways that you could engage with that person or talk with them or understand where they're coming from or empathize with them. And you're kind of skipping all that by jumping to the ontologically evil label and then using that as a get out of jail free card to having to think about those things. I like him outlining all the shit he's done or has been involved with, which he does at the beginning of the stream, and we'll likely have time to view that part of it. Responding to Mike's comments about Pete Buttigieg was also great. I hadn't seen the clip, but the hate for Pete mentioning he'd take a pill to not be gay went unchallenged and even supported by the people that were around him in the clip.
And the other thing is about Pete being ashamed that he's gay, something I said last night, which is obviously true because he remained in the closet until 2015, which is an unbelievable thing for a political figure.
There's all these complicated feelings that are involved that you face, the same as any other gay person, with feeling like you're attracted to something maybe that you think that society shouldn't think that you should be attracted to, or that you're abnormal, or that you're weird. And all those feelings are leading to that answer about wishing he could take a pill to not be gay anymore. It would certainly remove a lot of the complications in his life. And that's not a statement that would be unique to Pete Buttigieg or somebody who hadn't been out yet. That's something that a lot of people who are even out feel, that if there was a way to simply change themselves to fit better with the status quo, they would take it. And going back to the trans emails, I don't doubt that if you were to talk to some of these trans people, they too would take a pill to simply remove body dysmorphia and feel more normal with what society expects out of them, right? Because it skips a lot of the problems that are coming about because of your sexual orientation or because of who you're attracted to. And if you were to merely remove that variable in the complicated equation of life, it would make things simpler for you and easier. And oftentimes when you're in the depths of despair about that very thing, that particular solution can be attractive to you. And I think it's a really humanizing moment for Pete Buttigieg that's treated really, really poorly by Mike. So, I like that. I kind of worry that people in Mike's life just enable him to have these sorts of takes by not challenging him. It may be because they're worried about hurting him or their relationship. And I'd prefer to believe that as opposed to them agreeing with him, like here or with Lumi, sometimes like you have that cringe friend that you don't argue with because you don't want to make them feel bad. However, with huge misunderstandings like this one, you kind of have to stand up and say something. And I was disappointed to see that nobody in the clip did. LGBT folks experience discrimination even when in the closet. If you think you're gay, bi, or trans and people around you shit on them, call them F/T slurs, and are generally bigoted, it can force you deeper in the closet or make you feel like shit, perhaps even more so than if you were out and proud about it. You don't have to be out to feel that way, and there may be even more going on mentally when you're stealth and this happens. Do you play along? Do you laugh it off? Do you say something at the risk of somebody, the conversation turning towards you or your orientation? Escaping all this confusion with a pill makes these situations that much easier. You don't have a stake in the outcome or something to hide. You're free from conflicting feelings and general discomfort. In this situation and navigating life, your feelings more broadly. It can seem so much easier to be straight in this world, and that can be a tempting state of being for a gay or trans person. It would be so much easier to not have body dysmorphia or homosexual feelings and all the things that come along with this orientation. Regarding brigading, to go to another point, I think through his definition, he has written himself a good defense. I think that similarly to ontologically evil or other Twitchisms, we kind of reach for words that invoke a feeling but are not accurate to the mechanics of what is going on. For instance, I think few would argue against the idea that when Destiny criticizes someone, particularly for an extended period of time, his community will be trained in bringing that up over and over again, both in his stream and the streams of these other people. We even see that during this stream, like when he's reviewing people he paid for canvassing help. He didn't even mention or even have Doug's name on the screen, yet Doug of 8K, or various amounts, depending on what part of the situation people remember, was spammed throughout the chat. When streamers and internet folks alike refer to this sort of occurrence in their own chat or online spaces as brigading, they kind of open themselves up to his argument here, right? That's not necessarily brigading to, inspire a meme in your community that's negative towards you, and then people that are in that adjacent community use that meme in your own, or when you're in other spaces. I would like to think that people are pointing at the harassment, memes, or insults, linking them to his community, and are simply using the wrong way of describing this. However, given the 2A rule, which in case you didn't know, we have some principles about, how we cover streams and stuff. 1 is improve and promote communication. 1A is to be specific and limit ambiguity / shorthand, like when I was talking about mental shortcuts. Number 2 is to improve and promote listening. Be charitable and fair within reason is 2A. So sometimes I have a problem with being over charitable, and that's something I'll kind of keep in mind when talking about this here. Let me get back to where I was. Right here. Okay. However, given Rule 2A, I understand that this may not be the case for everyone and a bit overly charitable to think that maybe they're just using the wrong word. Some people don't deserve this defense, but my point goes out to the people who are in this position. When you use a word pointing towards coordination, intent alone isn't going to prove that. He can't just not like you, and that mixed with him talking shit equals coordination, right? So simply by not liking you and creating a meme or something like that, he's not necessarily engaging in brigading behavior. Mix that with his ban infrastructure, and it would seem like you were fighting a losing battle. You should probably just be DMing RTBA if you're having serious targeted harassment issues from known DGGers. I've talked numerous points on the channel about how RTBA, one of the head mods of the Destiny community, is somebody that creators should reach out to when they're having problems with harassment from known users of the DGG community, because he'll act very quickly to deal with that and to rectify that situation. And I think that many of the people who complain about these things benefit from it in one way or the other, whether it's the ethos of their content being the anti-DGG people or whatever, and for whatever reason they choose not to go through the formal route of letting the mods know that they're going through this, and I think that that's a mistake. However, I will also make the point that there is a strange position to be in where this isn't an option. When the criticism, harassments, insults, whatever you may call them, from here on out, I'll call this hounding, is hurtful and makes streaming or being online suck, but it doesn't meet the bar of threats of violence or other obvious things for RTBA and the other mods to act on. I've talked about hounding with streamers behind the scenes and with Destiny himself, and I recently reached out to RTBA about this as well. And the advice is more or less to keep streaming and hope that through multiple appearances, people begin to remember you for something different, which is the advice Steven gave me. RTBA continues to encourage that you reach out to him and let him know, and he won't make fun of you for bringing these sorts of things up, even if they don't hit that upper level threshold of like targeted harassment or brigading or threats of violence, things like that. I've talked about hounding. Furthermore, we're urged not to talk about it because the more you bring it up, the more frequently it will occur. Meaning that if you're generally open with your community about stuff, like I am with you all, it makes it it puts you into this tough position even more difficult. It makes your tough position even more difficult. I shouldn't try to correct what I've written on the fly. I can't engage and decompress how I normally would and have to leave the issue unspoken, which is something that I'm kind of rethinking at this moment. While on the whole, this can help with the volume of messages, it doesn't help with the real problem from my perspective, which is the impact it has on you. The advice, again, can be to toughen up. We're told that if you can't handle that stuff, you simply won't survive in the space. However, I think if we are willing to pursue bans on people for threats and continued harassment, there should be warnings, then bans for continued hounding as well. That's how I handle it in my community. You generally get your one shot at being a jerk or using one of the many hounding remarks against me, and then you are promptly warned about what will happen should you step wrong again. At that point, I have no guilty conscience about banning somebody who may not have known that the hounding remark bothered me. So I'm not going to instantly ban you, but I will give you a solid warning once. Merrick actually words this in a decent way and mentions this phenomena in the conversation that Steven links to in the document. Destiny references a similar strain of this issue when discussing people referencing a characterization of his positions or a commonly repeated instance of this without a direct citation to what had actually happened or the person's response. Even his "just move" meme seems to be a big DGG meme that hurts people's understanding of the nuance of his initial position on that issue. These often become the larger meme, and it's sad to say, but no amount of fighting back or correcting the record corrects that perceived issue. I've not been the best at fighting back against narratives about me, like with the Cherry situation, in which people are seemingly convinced I walked into Cherry's kitchen as she was singing along to a song, said the N-word, and I told her that she can't say that, which is not how that happened. But even when I have been quick to reply, like in the case with the sources I sent to Chud Logic during the Aya Verita arc, or the conversation I had with Destiny a few months ago, the vocal minority of the chat that causes this issue will continue with the meme or the joke, maybe even more so now that I've brought attention to it. Going back even further, there are people to this day who still think the rhetoric arc with Destiny can be boiled down to me telling him to be nicer. This in spite of even their streamer taking on the year of rhetoric and acknowledging the need to factor optics and rhetoric as well as audience perception when engaging in debate with people. The core argument I had for Steven early on. Destiny himself does this in the section where he notes Vosh's issue with oversimplifying and misconstruing what someone is saying by saying Vosh's criticism is a "your rhetoric is mean" argument, using quotes and not even paraphrasing properly. Pardon my essay brain. If you use quotes, like you use two of those little apostrophes, generally that's going to mean that word for word, what you're putting in those quotes is what the person had said. And it may just be a minor, formatting pet peeve, but he put that in there, and that's not even what Vosh had said. Vosh does mention, and reiterates Steven being antagonistic, but in my opinion, the start of that clip about hyperbolic language gives us a lot more to chew on and seems to be something Steven worked on personally and probably would have been the better focus for that section. This has led me to being doomer on responding to controversy, like with Cherry, and makes me think that sometimes not responding may be the better course of action for myself personally. Rather than prolonging the event and possibly digging a deeper hole for yourself, my general disposition leads me to let it go and just accept that it'll keep happening. I'm beginning to think that even mentioning it bothers you or that you'd like to correct the record is a misstep most of the time. However, I also understand it can work out in your favor, like Chud fighting his allegations of grooming, the cost to which is reminding your enemies that it can be brought up to trigger you, like with Chud and grooming, to prove this with the same examples. So even Chud fighting back against that, I think, makes people more likely to bring it up again in the future or have that be their memory of Chud logic. And lastly, the Vosh X Hassad logs were crazy and pretty damning of the dude's perspective. Maybe this was old news to y'all, but I had never ever seen those before, and that was enlightening to his kind of meta-level perspective on the way he's engaging on the platform, which I also talked about discussing with IRI and Chud Logic and many other streamers outside of stream. What are the kinds of strategies that you're doing to grow? What are the kinds of strategies you go into a conversation with? How do you deal with certain other personalities? How do you engage in conversations to have the best outcomes for you and your brand, right? And we got a lot of insight into the way that Vosh thinks through those clips, and that gave us a little bit of insight into the way he thinks at a meta level about streaming and the actions he engages in on stream. So that's kind of a TLDR of all the things in the document that I really wanted to comment on or I wanted to have in this short section. This will probably make it into a YouTube video. Thank you to Tack in advance for that. And I have quotes and stuff and links ready for him when he embarks on that journey. Anywho, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and open up the VOD here and we'll jump into it. So this is something to keep in mind because it'll be a theme which will keep coming up. This brigading and harassing other communities is something that we're going to prove that Vosh does regularly.